The situation in Sudan remains volatile. The Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, is on her way to Kenya, and Canadian Armed Forces members are on the ground in the region too. For more on the Canadian military's response so far and how things are going to work moving forward, I'm joined by the commander of the Canadian Joint Operations Command, Vice-Admiral Bob Auchterlonie. Thank you for coming in early this morning, Commander. Glad you're here.
Hey, thanks very much, Rosemary, and good morning.
Not so early for a commander, of course, I'm sure. You've already been hard at work for many hours. I want to start with the decision made by the government and I guess with the Canadian Armed Forces to no longer go ahead with any flights out of Sudan. What can you tell me about what is happening at that Wadi Sedna airfield right now, how dangerous it is?
Hey, well, thanks very much there, Rosemary. I think I can tell you that, I've probably been overusing the word this week, but, volatile, tenuous, and unpredictable is the word on the ground right now in Sudan. I think there has been a tentative ceasefire in place for the last, 72 hours, extended a further 72 hours. At this time, there's still fighting between the warring factions and including in close proximity to our air operations, including on the airfield. And this has been impacting operations. Obviously, that sort of friction of ongoing war is certainly impacting the operations on the ground.
So is it fair to say that the ceasefire that had allowed you to get 6 flights out is not really holding anymore, that it's just too dangerous?
Yeah, I would say that the ceasefire has effectively collapsed, and there doesn't seem to be any viable mediation avenue forward at this time. So the situation on the ground has been changing rapidly, and I think that's been noted by ourselves and our partners from Global Affairs Canada throughout the week as it has become more and more tenuous to conduct air operations.
So many Canadians who were able to get out, about I think 400 or so, who were able to get out, had to make their way to that airfield in order to get on one of our planes or a plane from our allies. Do you know if there were any Canadians at the airfield at the time when things started getting a little difficult, and whether Canadian forces had to help them get out of there?
Well, we evacuated last night. I think you're tracking from the minister's recent announcement about 209 folks evacuated last night on 2 separate C-130J Hercules aircraft from the Royal Canadian Air Force. We took all the entitled persons that were available at that time and evacuated them from the airfield with our personnel on the ground, working with our partners, namely the British.
Are there Canadian Armed Forces at that airfield now? Are they on the ground in that area?
We have evacuated our personnel from the ground at Wadi Sedna Airfield on our last evacuation flight last night, so we are clear of that airfield at this time, and our British counterparts have closed down operations as well, and they'll be clear in the next few hours.
So what are Canadian Armed Forces in the region doing, and if you can give me a sense of where they are and what they're doing there?
I think, just to paint the picture, we've been in the region. We've had land, sea, air, and special operation forces in the region for about a week and a half as this crisis has developed. So we have personnel supporting the Canadian Embassy in terms of the evacuation. They're now co-located with our Canadian ambassador in Djibouti, and the embassy may be moving forward to Kenya, as noted by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. At the same time, we have maritime assets in close proximity to the port of Sudan. We have members of the Army located in Jordan as well as in Djibouti, and those forces will be moving forward to Port Sudan as well to work with our UK and embassy and our IRCC colleagues. So we have a laydown throughout the region, all this being enabled by the Royal Canadian Air Force in terms of assets we have available. You've heard about the Hercules, but as well as C-17 and Airbus. So we have, in fact, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Special Operations Forces in the area and have been for quite some time.
The idea now to move to Port Sudan, which is what the Defense Minister mentioned this morning as well, that perhaps there will be an opportunity to remove people from there, evacuate people from there. I understand that could be done with a U.S. convoy. Would the Canadian Armed Forces be involved in that, in protecting a convoy from getting to Khartoum to Port Sudan?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have redirected efforts for evacuation coordination to Port Sudan at this time, obviously working with our U.S.-led multinational partners, including in this convoy. So at this point, this is Global Affairs redirecting Canadians in the area for those convoys. We've already had 2 successful moves by the U.S. They happened 2 days. There was one 2 days ago. There was one yesterday, and there's currently one scheduled for today and tomorrow as well. So there's opportunities available. There are seats in the convoy for Canadians, and Global Affairs Canada is reaching out to our affected persons in the region to offer that up.
How difficult is this operation, Commander? I know obviously the last one that comes to mind for me is Afghanistan. Circumstances are obviously different, but how difficult and complicated is this given the situation there?
Well, I think just simply geographically, as the crow flies between Ottawa and Sudan is over 10,000 kilometers. It's much farther to actually get there. So we're talking forward projecting operations on the far side of the globe to assist Canadians. So this is a complicated effort. As I said, the situation on the ground also extremely volatile and changing. You've seen this over the past few days. A Turkish aircraft took fire a few days ago inbound to Wadi Sedna. Even yesterday, our flights flew into a contested airfield with significant amounts of small arms fire in vicinity, but they still flew in and evacuated the Canadians and other entitled personnel.
Wow. You said that the special forces were there. I assume you mean JTF-2. And are they involved in the evacuations, or are they involved in security operations around some of the people?
Thanks. I'm probably not going to speak to specifics about our Special Operations Forces. That being said, they've been integral to our operations on the ground, as well as supporting the ambassador in the region, as well as working with our U.S. counterparts in the evacuation of our embassy staff out of Khartoum to Djibouti. At the same time, it's a combination, as I said, between Special Operations Force assets on the ground, as well as conventional forces of both the Royal Canadian Navy, Royal Canadian Air Force, and the Canadian Army.
I mentioned Afghanistan. I don't know whether you were involved in that evacuation. How would you say it is different than what unfolded in Afghanistan?
Well, I think there are some similarities and there's some differences. I'll talk about the similarities first. And I was the commander of a Joint Ops Command for Operation Aegis evacuating out of Afghanistan. The similarities is it is a contested airfield. Just to bring that to point, there was ground fire received for Turkish aircraft a few days ago. As I said, last night there was significant ground fire in the area while our aircraft were landing and taking off. And if you can imagine, that was a cycle of darkness, night vision, no lights, tactical approach into a contested airfield, very similar to Afghanistan. So we're very fortunate to have skilled tactical aviators and crewmen on board those aircraft to get in and out during a contested operation. So that's a similarity. Moving into the airfield in a contested area was a similarity. I think the difference is, and for Canadians, is that in this case we have more than one option. So in Afghanistan we were time-based and we had one option to get folks out of Kandahar, out of Kabul, HKIA, and that was via lift. Here we have other options, and this is what we're providing for Global Affairs Canada. So working with our allies and partners, which we do all over the world, the first option available was to airlift folks out, which we've done. We've lifted approximately 550 personnel out via our C-130J Hercules. At the same time, working with our partners, providing second options so we can do a ground move between Khartoum and Port Sudan to enable Canadians to move. As the situation on the ground changes, we have now ceased operations in the air. We're now moving in the ground and be able to support Global Affairs Canada and IRCC in Port Sudan with our forces there, be it air, land, or maritime.
Just quickly, Commander, is there any world in which flights could recommence?
Yes. At this time, I would say no. The ceasefire doesn't seem to be holding. There was significant ground fire in the region last night. Based on that risk, and this changing risk and threat assessment has been evolving over the past number of days. We're obviously closely coordinating with our UK counterparts on the ground, with our allies in terms of surveillance and intelligence. And at this point in the near term, we're not restarting operations in Wadi Sedna in the near term.
Vice-Admiral Bob Auchterlonie, so nice to see you here, just in person, not far from where I am. Thank you for making the time. I know you're a very busy man today. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Rosemary.
Okay,
have a good day.
Have a good Sunday. Thank you.